General Motors killed the Buick Roadmaster Estate in 1996, just as America was about to fall in love with giant family haulers. This thing had everything buyers claimed to want: a huge body, 3 rows, rear-wheel drive, V8 power, and enough comfort to cross states without thinking about it. So why did it disappear? Because the Roadmaster did not die from a lack of demand. The demand simply changed uniforms, moving out of wood-grain wagons and into sport utility vehicles. The Roadmaster Estate sat at the top of General Motors' last full-size wagon family. From 1991 through 1996, General Motors built these cars on the B-body platform, shared with the Chevrolet Caprice wagon and the Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser. The Buick was the more upscale version: softer trim, more chrome, available wood-grain siding, and a nameplate meant to make an old formula feel dignified instead of outdated. Underneath, it was not trying to be modern in the way the market was starting to define modern. It used body-on-frame construction, rear-wheel drive, and a long wheelbase, just like traditional American family cars had for decades. It was wide, heavy, and built around space rather than packaging efficiency. That mattered because the Roadmaster Estate was a true family hauler. It had a massive cargo area, a rear-facing third-row seat, and the ability to carry people and luggage at the same time without pretending to be sporty or compact. It was the kind of car designed for vacations, hardware store runs, school pickups, and long highway miles with very little drama. But by the early 1990s, the family car market was being rewritten. Minivans offered sliding doors, low floors, and easier child access. Front-wheel drive sedans promised better fuel economy and more modern road manners. Early sport utility vehicles were beginning to sell toughness and a higher seating position as family features, not just off-road features. That is what makes the Roadmaster Estate important. It was not killed because it was too small, too weak, or unable to do the job. It was one of the most capable wagons America ever built, arriving just as buyers decided the classic station wagon shape no longer looked like the future. What made the Roadmaster Estate different was that its old-school engineering was not just a styling choice. The body-on-frame layout gave it the same basic toughness buyers associated with big Detroit sedans, police cars, taxis, and workhorse family vehicles. It felt familiar to people who trusted a long hood, rear-wheel drive, and a full frame underneath them. That construction also made the car useful in ways many newer family vehicles were not. The Roadmaster could absorb rough roads, carry heavy loads, and take abuse without feeling delicate. For families who kept cars for years, or who needed one vehicle to handle everything from commuting to vacation hauling, that mattered more than having the newest layout. Then, there was the engine. Early cars used a 5.7-liter V8 that already gave the wagon relaxed power, but the reputation changed in 1994 when Buick added the LT1 V8, closely related to the engine used in the Chevrolet Corvette and Chevrolet Impala Supersport. In Roadmaster tune, it was built for smooth torque, not racetrack drama, but it made this huge wagon surprisingly quick. That power changed what the car could do. Loaded with passengers, luggage, and the air conditioning running, the Roadmaster did not feel strained on the highway. It could merge with confidence, climb grades without constant downshifting, and cruise for hours at interstate speeds with the engine barely working. It could also tow. Properly equipped, the Roadmaster Estate was rated to pull a serious trailer, which put it in a different category from many sedans, minivans, and front-wheel drive family cars of the same period. A boat, a small camper, or a utility trailer fit the mission of the car. Inside, the advantage was comfort over distance. The seats were broad, the ride was soft, and the cabin was quiet in the traditional Buick way. It was not trying to carve corners or feel European. It was designed to make 500 miles feel easy. That is why the Roadmaster Estate was more than a nostalgic holdout. It was a durable, powerful, long-legged family machine built for buyers who still needed a real full-size American car. Strange part is that the Roadmaster Estate did not have a practicality problem. In several ways, it had already solved the problem that pushed families toward full-size sport utility vehicles. It offered 3-row seating, with a rear-facing third row that could turn the wagon into a people mover when needed. Fold that seat away, and the long roof created a huge, flat cargo area for luggage, groceries, sports gear, strollers, or anything else a family could throw at it. It was not pretending to be compact. It was a full-size family hauler with the usable length to prove it. That mission was very close to what buyers later wanted from Chevrolet Suburbans, Tahoes, Ford Expeditions, and other big sport utility vehicles. They wanted one vehicle that could carry kids, friends, luggage, pets, and vacation supplies without forcing them to pack lightly. The Roadmaster could do that without being a truck. Its shape also made it practical in ways many sport utility vehicles were not. The roof was lower, the floor was easier to reach, and loading heavy bags into the back did not not require lifting them as high. Children and older passengers could climb in more easily, and the cabin felt like a car because it was one. That mattered in daily life. A parent loading groceries, a suitcase, or a sleeping child was dealing with a lower step-in height and a lower cargo opening than they would in a tall truck-based sport utility vehicle. The wagon had length instead of height, and for many family jobs, length was the more useful dimension. On paper, the Roadmaster Estate gave buyers much of what the coming sport utility boom promised: space, seats, comfort, cargo room, towing ability, and highway ease. But the market was changing. Utility still mattered, but image was starting to matter just as much. By the 1990s, the station wagon had become a victim of its own memory. For decades, wagons had been the default family car, which meant they carried all the visual baggage of family life from an earlier era. Long roofs, fake wood grain, rear-facing jump seats, luggage racks, and soft highway manners reminded buyers of their parents' cars. Even when a wagon was comfortable and useful, it often looked like something from childhood, not something a younger family wanted to choose for itself. The first major blow came from the minivan. Chrysler proved that families would leave traditional wagons if they were offered something that felt purpose-built for modern parenting. Sliding doors, upright seating, easy cabin access, and clever interior packaging made minivans more convenient for school runs and suburban errands. They did not look glamorous, but they looked current. Then sport utility vehicles changed the meaning of family transportation again. A Chevrolet Tahoe or Ford Explorer could carry kids and cargo, but it also suggested camping trips, bad weather confidence, and a tougher lifestyle. Many buyers never needed serious off-road ability. They wanted the feeling that their family vehicle was capable of more than carpool duty. That is the key difference. Americans were not turning away from size. They were turning away from the station wagon identity. They still wanted space, seating, power, towing ability, and road trip comfort. They just wanted those traits wrapped in something that looked adventurous instead of domestic. The Roadmaster Estate was caught in that gap. It could do many of the jobs buyers were asking for, but its shape told the wrong story at the wrong time. In a showroom, it had to compete not only against other vehicles, but against the idea that wagons belonged to the past. That left General Motors with a harder question than whether the Roadmaster was useful. It was useful. The question was whether keeping it alive made business sense, when the culture around it had already moved on. The numbers made the decision look almost inevitable. Across the entire 1991 through 1996 run, Buick built just over 50,000 Roadmaster Estate wagons. That was not 50,000 a year, that was the total. The Chevrolet Caprice wagon was not dramatically stronger, and the Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser was even rarer, disappearing after only a short run. For a company the size of General Motors, those volumes were difficult to defend. A full-size wagon was not just a sedan with extra glass. It needed its own rear body structure, roof stamping, tailgate, cargo area trim, rear seating hardware, weather sealing, and supplier support. Every part had to be engineered, purchased, stocked, and installed for a vehicle that relatively few people were buying. The problem became worse because the platform itself was aging. The B-body cars had deep roots, and by the mid-1990s, keeping them compliant, competitive, and profitable required more effort for less reward. General Motors could spend money refreshing a shrinking wagon line, or it could put those resources toward vehicles with stronger growth. That brings the story to Arlington Assembly in Texas. Arlington was the plant building these big rear-wheel drive cars, including the Roadmaster Estate, Caprice wagon, and the related sedans. Factory space is never neutral. Every hour on an assembly line has to be assigned to something, and by 1996, General Motors had a better use for that capacity. Full-size sport utility vehicles were surging. Chevrolet Tahoes, Suburbans, and their General Motors relatives carried higher transaction prices and stronger margins than traditional wagons. They also matched where the market was moving. If buyers wanted big, powerful, family-sized vehicles, General Motors could make more money selling them trucks and sport utilities than keeping a low-volume wagon alive. So the Roadmaster Estate was not killed only because of styling, or because executives disliked wood grain, or because wagons were suddenly useless. It died because General Motors had to choose what Arlington would build next. The same plant capacity that supported America's last great traditional wagon could be redirected to vehicles with better demand and better profit. That made the Roadmaster's fate a corporate allocation decision, not just a product decision. The wagon still had loyal buyers, but loyalty at that scale could not compete with the economics of the sport utility boom. What happened next proves General Motors had not lost faith in big American family vehicles. It had lost faith in the wagon shape. The same buyer who once looked at a Roadmaster Estate still wanted space for kids, luggage, dogs, boats, and road trips. They still wanted a high seating position, a strong engine, and the feeling that their vehicle vehicle could handle more than a normal car, but by the late 1990s, those desires were being sold through a different image. A truck-based sport utility vehicle made practicality feel rugged. A full-size wagon carried memories of parents, suburbs, and wood grain. A Tahoe or Suburban carried the language of work, adventure, and authority, even when it spent most of its life in a school parking lot. The function was familiar, but the status had changed. That shift mattered because buyers were not just purchasing cargo volume, they were purchasing identity. The Roadmaster was enormous, comfortable, and genuinely capable, but it looked like the end of an era. The sport utility vehicle looked like the beginning of one. So the Roadmaster became a transitional casualty. It was too useful to be irrelevant, with rear-wheel drive, available V8 power, towing ability, and real long-distance comfort. But it was too old-fashioned to survive in a market that had learned to make size feel modern again. The American station wagon did not disappear because it failed at its job. It disappeared because another shape learned to sell the same promise better. The Buick Roadmaster Estate was the final chapter of the traditional full-size American station wagon. Body on frame, rear-wheel drive, huge inside, and built for distance. America never stopped wanting enormous family vehicles. It stopped wanting them to look like wagons. Thanks for watching. Tell us in the comments if you would have saved the Roadmaster, and subscribe to Forgotten Detroit for more documentaries on the corporate decisions that changed American motoring.